magicians, welcome to yet another Money Magic Podcast. My guest today is Lise Brenner, and she is a Money Magic student, but also has been my one-on-one coaching client, and she is absolutely incredible. I asked her to come on the podcast to share her journey and her business with us. Firstly, Lise is a former writer, right? So we connect on that, like tearing your hair out. I'm not joking when I say I literally wrote, "What's your money personality?" And here it is right next to my bed because I've been doing podcast interviews and stuff, crying with tears streaming down. So, yeah, no, writing isn't as glamorous as all that sometimes. But she also does body work, somatic work, and she's a former ballet dancer and just exciting. She did ballet dancing in New York, guys, and she is now in Chiang Mai, so she's traveling, and it's just so lovely to connect with her. Hi, Lee, so lovely to connect with you in Chiang
Hi, Van. It's good to see you.
Mai. Nice to see you. You're in one of my favorite cities, as most people know. How is Chiang Mai? How is Thailand?
Wow. The only other time I was in Asia was when I went to Bhutan. And yeah, and this is a whole other thing. Bhutan is quiet. But I love it. It's beautiful. And everybody is so nice. I mean, I think you told me before I came that even when it was frenetic, it would feel calm.
Yeah.
And you're right. It completely does. I mean, there's just such nobody's like, nobody seems to be trying to put one over on you, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I think there are sometimes tourist prices, but like, of course, that's totally normal. But just the niceness of everybody, they're just so like, well, no, we'll do this and we'll do this. It's great. I love it. I love it.
It's nice. Like people are so nice in Chiang Mai. So nice, so open. Oh my gosh. Like I genuinely love Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai is where I healed so much of myself. So it has like such a soft spot in my heart. And I think that's why I know that I'll always keep going back to Chiang Mai. But funny enough, I don't think that's where I'll be stationed in Thailand. We've been having many conversations in this house about where we'll be stationing. And it will not be Chiang Mai, it will be Koh Phangan. So still
Okay.
Thailand, but Koh Phangan. So Elise, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how do you define yourself as a soul on this life journey?
That's such a great question. Well, what do I do? Well, at the moment, let me just kind of rewind a little bit. I think what I'm really doing at the moment is reconnecting with parts of myself that I had, for whatever reasons, sort of said, this isn't happening anymore. And so, I mean, I was a ballet dancer. I did not dance as a ballet dancer in New York. By the time I got to New York at age 21, I'd already been an apprentice with a couple regional companies and knew that, my body shape and also my personality was not suited to being in a traditional ballet company. I got kind of bitchy, interiorly speaking, about being the lowest person on the totem pole when I was in the Corps de Ballet. And also, constantly being told that I was the wrong shape and, all that kind of thing. So, because I knew I was a dancer, like I've known I was a dancer since I was 5 years old. So that was kind of like, I get it. I get the ballet aesthetic. I teach ballet. It's like I totally understand the excellence and all that. And I was like, but I'm a dancer. I've always kind of felt like I was a reincarnated ballet dancer, but we don't need to talk about that. So anyway, I moved to New York, and I kept studying ballet, and I taught, and I was really lucky. I was taught to teach by one of the world's great ballet teachers, Alfredo Corvino. So I feel really, really blessed about that. I had an amazing time. I loved being in the dance world. I was in the downtown dance world. I became a postmodern choreographer. I mean, I loved it. But anyway, eventually I got tired of not, what I'm understanding now is that I wasn't tired of dancing. I was tired of the stress of trying to, I was working as a paralegal at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. I was a choreographer, so I was running a company. I was teaching. I was trying to stay active. I was performing also, so it was like I was insanely busy. And I'm 63 now, but basically what happened was that when I was around 38, I started looking around for a master's or a PhD program in dance, because I thought if I had that, then I could get hired not just as an adjunct, which I'd already done, not just as, like a part-time non-tenure track, but for real. And I started, and I would say that was the beginning of the journey that like has taken me to meeting you and to being here. Because what happened when I moved to New York was I had already been on my own since I was 16. I moved out of my parents' house at 16 and started supporting myself and dancing and doing stuff. And then I moved to New York when I was 21, and I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew what I wanted. I knew that I wanted to dance as much as possible. I knew that I wasn't going to be acceptable in the upper tiers of the ballet world. It was already too late for me for that. I knew I was a really good ballet dancer and that I loved teaching because I'd already been teaching since I was 17. And so I knew that I was going to have to find my way, like so many people do when they go to New York. It was like, I was just like, I was ready for it. I'm like, I don't care if nobody else thinks I can do this. I know I can. I moved there with $1,000 in savings bonds that my grandma she gave each one of her grandkids a savings bond every Christmas for $25 or $50. So anyway, I had $1,000 and I was like, I can live on this for 2 months. Well, yeah, no, but so, I mean, my whole thing was, I'm going to do this. So I did. I mean, I did it. I got myself high-paying corporate jobs where I only had to show up 4 hours a day. I had health insurance, and the rest of the time I was in the dance world. It worked great. And then it wasn't me anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I really, really love your story about just saving up and then just going. I think I call that like the naivety of youth, right? Like, I think if I had waited to travel, I would be, I don't know if I'd ever be able to do it the way that I did it now. If I'd waited like an extra 10 years or whenever, it was good to do it when I was 21 because I truly didn't know anything. So I just used all the money in my credit card and I was like, we shall see to finish, and just go. And so
Exactly.
I love that kind of go for it attitude. But so you find yourself in this ballet world and then you didn't feel it anymore. What did you do when this is one thing that you knew you were born to do? And then you just realized that this is no longer what I want to do. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it was really tough. So I mean, when I was about 38, I started looking at these school programs, right? And I had never thought about that. I mean, I'm from a generation where if you're going to dance, you just danced. You didn't go get a university degree unless you were fantastic and you were at a conservatory like Juilliard or something. But like a dance degree from a university just is like, what? So,
I
so
love those days.
yeah. I mean, we were like, in my time, it was like like a journeyman apprentice, like the medieval apprentices. You just went and did your job. I started dancing professionally when I was 14 in Nutcracker, but whatever. So,
Oh.
so I, so, so I was like, okay, I mean, still thinking, I mean, this is actually really important to the whole kind of development I'm understanding, is that I was looking for another kind of organization or another element of the patriarchy to give me my money. So this has been a really, really, really big thing. I mean, I've been unpacking this a lot with you and with Camisa also, and with other people before I met you guys. And, just I've been through a whole journey since I would say since I was 54. I would say
Wow.
it's been almost 10 years now. And at the core of it, one of the big things at the core of it has been understanding that there was always a part of me that felt like money and safety came from men. And they could be actual men, or they could be corporations, or they could be universities, or they could be NGOs. But there was like it had to come from somewhere outside. Somebody who said, okay, you're good enough, I'll give you money. And I was really good at getting men to give me money in this way. I mean, I moved to New York. I went to a prep school in Seattle. I was well educated. I held myself well. I knew how to put the right costumes on. For things that, we don't need to go into, I was really well trained in being a good girl and in reading people's minds and giving them exactly what they wanted.
Mm.
So I was a shoo-in to be like a secretary or some kind of lower management young girl that some older man would be like, oh, she's smart, she's pretty, I can do that thing. And it happened to me over and over and over. And I'm very grateful because these were by and large really good, smart, nice people who really wanted me to succeed and trained me how to do really important work. And,
Mm.
I was a really good product liability paralegal at Pfizer, and I got to work on orthopedic products, and it was fun. It was interesting. But why did I get that? I got that because I knew the right thing. I knew how to do it, right? And so anyway, what ended up happening was that I couldn't find a university in the States or in Canada that suited me. As one of my mentors, Bessie Schoenberg, said to me when I was talking to her about this, she was like, oh, but dear, you should be teaching in one of these places. And I was like, yeah, Bessie, they don't want me. And, and she was like, well, just don't go into debt, So what happened was that through a showcase that I used to run with some other choreographers, we would have all kinds of people coming through because it was an open thing. We just, we did it 5 times a year. You'd send an application, and if you sent your application in on time, you got a 10, 15-minute slot. So this group came from Amsterdam, and I was talking to them, and one of them, who's since become a really well-known sort of downtown New York choreographer, he said to me, you need to check this program out. And it was 2000 then. It was like the spring of 2000, and the internet wasn't that great. But I found it, and I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then in the fall, I just was like, huh. And I happened to look at it just as the application period for the winter was opening. I also had a show coming a bit, my second kind of, for me, very big show in December. So I apply in October. I hear from them that I need to go there for an interview. I do a price line thing. I go overnight, have the interview, come back. I hear the end of November that, yes, I'm in. I need to be there in the middle of January, have my show in early December, and then, get rid of everything in my apartment and move to Amsterdam.
Wow. Wow. And this is why we're having this conversation, because you are this incredible queen of pivoting and continuing to, I don't know if reinvent is the right word, but for me, it's just knowing your life story, how you've been able to pivot, reinvent, and keep going into new spaces is really incredible. And I think most people live with this deep fear of reinventing themselves, especially as time goes by in our lives, right? We feel this insane pressure to be settled, to be in that career space. How do you deal with that? Did you ever encounter that? And how did you maneuver that in your life? I mean, going from New York to Amsterdam, and it's a whole different field altogether. Now you're going to study something, a completely different world. How
It
do you
wasn't
maneuver?
actually, I didn't think it was a completely different world. I mean, it was an MFA in multidisciplinary performance. They took 12 international people at a time. Well, there were a few Dutch people, but it was really from the mindset of, I would say, the late 80s in the Netherlands, even though it was already 2000, which was really like international diplomacy through art and design. They brought people in. They had some amazing programs to bring refugees into the Netherlands because they were artists, so they kind of combined things. I mean, it was a really interesting period in the Netherlands. But I thought I was I thought I was continuing my New York career. I didn't. I mean, I'd lived in Europe before. We lived in Romania when I was 10. I'd lived in Germany. I'd lived in the UK. Lived in Italy, but I had never. What I realized when I got there was that I had never lived abroad as an independent adult.
Oh,
I also realized for the first time that because I moved there when I was 40, that I was 40, not 21.
okay. And what does
which
that mean?
which someday you will also understand. But I mean, it was like I had come to New York with so much focus about what I wanted, and I'd been on the same path, right? And it was a path that had started really when I was 5 years old. And when I got to the Netherlands, what I suddenly realized was, oh, I had a career path, which I followed. And even though it didn't always look to people outside my profession, which is very normal for dancers and writers and other people, it might not look to them like I had a career. Everybody in my world knew it was a career and knew the level of it, right? And even though I had a lot of trouble at times owning what I had actually done, because of course, one thing dancers are taught, especially women, is that you always have to keep doing more because you're never good enough. And one of my mentors, Phoebe Neville, I remember she was a wonderful choreographer. And I remember when I first started choreographing, she said to me, listen, this is really important. The view from the middle of the hill is just as valuable and just as interesting as being on the mountaintop. Like, we're not all going to be Merce Cunningham. There's a whole bunch of things that go into the ecosystem that we're all living in. And, and she's basically saying, be proud of who you are, because you have something to offer and you need to offer it. So I got to Amsterdam, and I got into this program, which is called Das Arts. And I mean, it was brutal. Oh my God. I mean, there was so much of a culture shock, the sort of Northern European and New York, there's some issues there. And I mean, I ended up staying 5 years. I ended up making great friends. I ended up shifting my thinking in really interesting ways. It turned me into a different kind of artist, which is the kind of work that I did when I went back to New York. But it also profoundly shook my foundations. And I don't think I ever completely recovered until the last. I mean, I feel like that's what's happening now. And yeah. And but I'll just kind of go back to this. One of the things it did for me was, I've always been a professional writer, even if you don't call it that. I mean, the reason I got hired at Pfizer to do the work I did was because I can write, I can organize information, I can research, I can write a very persuasive, anything you want, and I've written all kinds of stuff over my life. I've written funding applications, I've done copy, I've written websites, I've ghostwritten for people, I have done all kinds of things. But in Amsterdam, I started editing for non-native English speakers who were publishing in English. And that turned into something that then supported me when I went back to New York, because I was busy parlaying that into different kinds of writing jobs. So that's when I really think of myself as starting to become a professional writer. So
I love that. I guess this is very, very interesting for me to listen to, right? Because I love how you say that going from New York to Amsterdam, you were like, it wasn't a different thing in my head. And then you arrive and it just like completely shakes you. So one of the things that it also did was it led you into the body of work you do now, which is understanding the body, but also from your background in ballet. And I mean, this is a whole podcast on trauma and money, right? But I love to go into the trauma piece and what did you learn from being a ballet dancer that you are now utilizing in your work, that you are using in terms of helping people get into the body? And maybe even before that, what brings you to the work of going into your body? Remember, I once said to you, but if you're doing ballet as a ballerina, you're always in your body, right? And you're like, no, it's not the same thing. So could you please explain some of that to us?
yeah, absolutely. So this is something I've been really exploring in the last few years. And there's a bunch of components to it. So there's a lot of discussion about this now, or there is some discussion about, I wouldn't say there's a lot, but there is some discussion about this now in the kind of ballet adjacent world. I think in the actual conservatories, there's people I think are still trying to pretend that that it's not happening. But so here's the thing. I mean, I have always, all my life, been somebody who I respond physically to things, right? If the environment doesn't suit me, I get itchy. And then I get angry, and then I can't stand it. And then I'm just out of control, right? And I've always been like this. And so that quality, coupled with my good girl ability to read the room and to put like a mask around myself, I'm starting to really understand, for example, how difficult primary school was for me. I mean, I hated sitting still. And yet, if I was going to be a good girl, I had to learn how to sit still. And it's like, I'm suffering now from all of the energy that got trapped from doing that. But the thing with ballet is you're really busy with high level athletics and artistry. It's definitely, you're doing both things at the same time. But and I somehow always intuitively knew that the form was just a way to kind of organize that.
Mm.
And I'm really, really lucky, or you could just say that like Goddess was always looking out for me in that I always had teachers. Like my very first dance teacher was a woman named Martha Nishitani in Seattle, who was a modern dance teacher. That was her love. Her whole mission in life was to bring modern dance to Seattle. She was put in one of the internment camps. You know, she's Japanese American, so she spent the war as a teenager in, you know, in a concentration camp in the desert, came back to Seattle and just went on, you know, and I mean, an amazing woman, beautiful teacher. And her sort of basis was um, kind of the same ideas that eventually ended up being Limon technique. And so this is a very organic way of moving. It's a lot about, you know, using circles and squares, and, you know, and her way of teaching kids was just beautiful, just beautiful. So that was my first experience. And then I wanted to wear a tutu, and she's like, we don't wear tutus. And my mom's like, well, if you don't, you know, then no, because, you know. So when I went back to ballet when I was 11, even though I was in a school that was very strict in terms of not letting you think for yourself, I had this in my body from Martha. And I'd also been playing the violin since I was 6 years old. So I had a sense of music, at least of Western classical music. And I mean, we lived in Romania with all those weird rhythms going on all the time. And, you know, so kind of Arabic things happening. So and music was a big part of my life. So when I went back to ballet and they were telling me, well, you know, your right shoulder's too high and you got to get it down. And, you know, and, oh, you don't know how to pirouette. Well, you're stupid. You know what? I mean, that was my early teaching was on that kind of a level. Part of me was shamed and blamed myself. But another part of me was like, I know there's a better way. And I never stopped looking, you know, just from the first minute. I mean, the minute that I did my first summer course of beginning ballet, and then they put me in fourth year ballet immediately after that, you know, and they said, go on point. And I was like, no, no, I can't, you know, but I was on the lookout for the teachers who would let me dance. And I kept finding them, you know, and I wouldn't put up with not having that. And so but this is a constant thing. I mean, if you look at great ballerinas, they're a mixture of being able to do the form like superlatively, but at the same time, they break the rules all the time. Wow. Because they're dancing, right? They're dancing. And okay, yeah, they're like balancing forever, but they're dancing. That's what they're doing. Yeah. And so, you know, I was always like, you know, people that people now wouldn't remember, but like Lynn Seymour and, well, Ava Edka Komova. And I mean, there were dancer actors running around all over the place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And, you know, and people also, they were just more different in body shape and size. And anyway, it was a whole different time. And I loved it. And so, I'm sorry, this is very roundabout, but this is really important because for me, and then when I started teaching, and Alfredo was this too, he started off life as a boxer, and he liked to take machines apart. And, you know, he was like, how does it work? Not what are you telling me about how it works, but how does it really work? Like, how does gravity work? What is this thing? And so, I mean, I ended up working with a woman in New York before I left for Amsterdam named Nancy Topf, who was another person very much like me. She was a beautiful dancer, Cunningham trained. And when she started teaching Cunningham, she was like, I couldn't get the students to do what I needed them to do because they didn't know how their bodies worked. So she developed this whole technique with a good friend of hers whose name I'm forgetting, but you know, it was called dynamic anatomy, and it was all about visualizing the skeleton. I mean, this blew my mind. It was like it took away all the mystery, you know, and the good and bad, and it just left you with, well, how are the bones working? So it's
Yeah.
a whole different thing. So I've been really interested in all of that for a long time. And then I studied Tibetan Bon Buddhist meditation, and they do a lot of work with breath, and
Mm,
and then the chakras are very, there's a lot of tracking of physical sensation as the result of certain ways of thinking or breathing or
mm,
moving, and then doing soul retrievals, being guided through them with some of my senior teachers. So all of that together, um, I just, and I taught ballet for many, many years, and I taught beginners a lot. And I taught a lot of adult beginner classes. So I'd have people come in who'd had ballet when they were young, and they had all these misconceptions about how their bodies worked. And I mean, everybody does. I've been teaching company class for a company in Amsterdam. These are lovely, lovely young dancers. And I'm just like, why are you working in such counterproductive ways? I mean, I know why. They've been told to do that, but it has nothing to do with how their bodies work. It has nothing to do with how they feel. So trying to get people into what they're actually feeling is kind of that's been my whole journey with myself, because I've had to crack through this like intense ability to lead myself and see what you want and do it for you. So, and ballet definitely reinforces that. So I really had to do that for myself, and I'm only partway on the journey, but that's what interests me, is like, how can you be real to you? Right.
mm.
Yeah. So
Ooh,
that's what I work on with my clients, whether they're my dance students or whether they're my writing clients. That's what I work
yeah.
on.
Yes. So, what are some? I love what you say. Before I even ask my question, let me just backtrack and just acknowledge what you said. Love what you said about people do not know how their bodies work. Do you know there's a study that says only 36% or something of people in the world actually know how they're feeling in the moment that they're feeling an emotion?
I
That is
completely believe that.
that is so wild to me. So, like, they've done this research and people couldn't identify their feelings, couldn't do whatever, didn't know what they were feeling in the moment as they are experiencing an emotion. They don't know what emotion it is. They can't identify it. They don't understand it. And that's because we are not taught to be in our bodies. And I just wanted to know, so how do you teach people to go into their bodies? What is your first step? And for someone who doesn't even know, because I imagine that this is like the study, because I keep thinking to myself about the study on emotions, that many people don't know how they're feeling, right? But the thing is that people don't know, they don't know. They just, I think that they're just walking around thinking, it's okay, I'm just feeling this way. And that's why when you're trying to relationship, because when I read that study, I was like, oh my God, this is why we relationship the way we relationship, because we're not even aware what we're feeling. And that's why most of the time we think it's the other people in our lives that are causing our problems, right? And we don't understand what is happening in the moments when we are triggered and all that. So how do you get people to realize that it is important to be in your body? And I can imagine that is so challenging, especially in the bed. And then how do you get them to get into their bodies now that they realize that this is important? It matters.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yeah, I mean, basically, that's what I was busy with the whole. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so teaching, well, when I'm teaching ballet, especially if it's with beginners, it's easy because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So you can just start them off, and the same with kids, if they've had too many years of bad lessons or, disembodied lessons, it's a little more tricky. But kids have this inherent like body awareness, so you can get them back, right? But with the writers, well, here's what I'll say is that I've learned something. Um, so I've now had about a 20, almost a, yeah, I've had a long career now as a freelance writer. doing different things. And one of the things I've realized now is there are a lot of people who, I mean, I don't even put myself in the space where they know I'm there, right? Because I'm not interested in working with somebody who wants me to like write a dental office website. I mean, maybe I would be if it was the right person, but basically, you know, like the generic thing, like, no, I have no interest in that. In fact, I don't want to write for anybody. I want people to write for themselves. My goal is to get people to realize that just the same as anybody can dance, and I'm not saying that everybody's going to end up on the, you know, on the American Ballet Theater stage. That's not the point, but everybody can move, everybody can dance, everybody has the capacity to feel joy and completion in their body as they move, right? And so, you know, when I'm teaching dance, no matter who it's to, no matter what the context, that's my goal. You know, if you're a professional dancer and I need to help you get on stage and do something most people could never imagine doing, then I'll do that. But, you know, if it's like an 80-year-old lady who wants to learn how to do plies, I will work with, you know, it doesn't matter. I do the same things. It's just to different, does that make sense? Like I do the same things.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. With writers or people who are afraid to write, I mean, I'm afraid to write. I will just admit that. I'm afraid to write. I struggle every day with, I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm working with you, is because, you know, this has been such a block for me. Writing other people's stuff, no problem, but writing my own in my own voice, this is a huge thing for me. And I've been trying to do it in different ways, have done it in different ways for years. And what I have realized, especially recently, is that the reason why a lot of my writing failed, and by failed, I mean just didn't communicate and didn't satisfy me, was because I was standing way far away from it because I was too afraid to actually be present in my body and say what was actually true, right? So I had to put all kinds of little barriers and barricades. So the people who I generally am working with now are entrepreneurs or healers, or I'm about to start working with somebody who is, you know, a high level executive woman, but in transition. She's leaving all of the corporate stuff and now she's going into something else. But the way that I do it is pretty simple. I use the meditation techniques that I am approved as a practitioner to teach, and from the 3 doors. And then I use all the somatic experiencing that I learned from Nancy Top, that I learned myself as a dancer. I have people literally go into their bodies. Like I do some stuff directly out of Nancy, which is to have you drop your awareness down into the inside of your rib cage and explore the interior of your rib cage and realize, because most people don't ever think about that. We only think about that we have a front. You know, when I'm teaching dance, I always have the dancers work from their back. I really, you know, I'm like, no, you know, dance to me from your back, you know. And but if you get people to really go down and live inside their rib cage, go into their heart, but like their heart is held. I try to make people feel safe. I think that's it. I'm like, where are your feet on the ground?
Yeah.
You know? Where is your breath actually? Like, what are your lungs doing? Your lungs are expanding your ribs, right? You can feel the insides of your ribs because your lungs are working with them all the time. So I ground everything in reality. And then I ask them, once they're really, once I feel like, oh yeah, okay, you're really there, then I have them bring whatever it is that they want to say or write about and just drop it down into this really safe, secure center. And then let that talk to them. So that's how I do it. Yeah.
I love that. I love it. It's always going to be about being in the body. So, what has your journey been like? And also, what have you seen people's journeys be like when they drop into their bodies? We always talk about you have to be in your body, you have to drop into your body. But what have
Mhm.
you seen how have you seen people's lives transform, and how has your own life transformed from going into your body and being present with your body and working with your body?
Well, the friend who I am visiting here in Chiang Mai, is someone who, she's around my age and she's lived here for 20 years and she's got a lot of family she's single. She has a lot of family back in Seattle, where we both know each other from. And, she's a woman who has done a lot of things in her life and she loves it here. I mean, she loves it here. She lives in the most beautiful place, up north in the mountains. And but she's also like, when I got here, she was really, I could just see her. She was like thinking, really thinking hard about all this. And so I said, well, if you want, we could do a session and just
Mm,
see, so maybe you can stop like obsessing about what your decisions should be and just see
mm,
what your body actually has to tell you about where
mm,
you are right now and what you
mm,
want right now. So maybe, so you can relax a little bit. So we did a session a couple of days ago, and it was really beautiful because her body was so clear. Like what her body said to her was, it's not time to make the decision. It's time
mm,
to be slow. It's time to just take things as they come. It's time to, not force anything with family members or yourself. It's just not decision time yet. And you'll know when it is.
mm, mm.
And she could really hear it. I mean, it was really amazing. I watched her whole, like, it was like she just cleared, and I feel like that's what happens, whatever the
Yeah.
subject is, right? Whether it's like, what, what do I want to say about my work? What colors actually turn me on, because I do that with people too. It's like,
Yeah.
what, colors. What colors do you want on your website? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. You know? Yeah.
So the body as a messenger, the body is something that just carries messages for us that we can then tap into, and we can stop being in our heads. Oh my goodness. I really, really love that. And for you, in terms of your own personal journey, how has dropping into your body dramatically shifted your life?
Well, I mean, I have been dealing with like a chronic hip muscle spasm thing. We were talking about this earlier, and which seemed to me when it happened about 3 years ago to come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But what I've been realizing, I mean, this has been a really long, slow journey for me because this has had a lot of trauma. It was
Mm,
trapped there. Um, and I'm realizing a lot of anger.
mm,
I think this is where I put pretty much everything about like not wanting to sit still at age 6 on up. It's kind of got that quality to it. It has not been easy for me to let uh to stop being a ballerina about it. I mean, at first I just couldn't believe it. Being in that kind of pain constantly was, I was just like, I literally was like, I might as well die, if I can't sleep at night, if I can't walk, if I can't, I don't get the point. And so for me, it's been a long journey um, of letting myself be present. And I go away all the time because it's just so scary to me. But what I realized over the last, like, I don't even know how long it's been that I've been working with Camisa. but she really helped me start to just stay present and not try and fix anything. All the meditation I'd done had tried to teach me that, but hadn't really succeeded. It's like, well, you're a meditator too, so there's like, it's layers of stuff. And all the teachings tell you have to just be present and not try and control it, but to actually do that is so hard. And this is the same thing, but what I love about working with my body this way is that, there's no theology or anything. It's just me and my body. There's no right way to do it. The only thing that's right is, am I there or not? And the challenge isn't doing it right. The challenge is showing up and doing it. And that's the thing I've been having to get so much support to be able to just do that. And so I really respect how scary it is for people.
Yes, definitely. I can respect how, because I talk about in the book, I'm a runaway archetype secondary. So getting into my body was a process, because feeling into my body was one of the scariest things, because that's where all our emotions and memories live. So now you have to face this thing that you've been running away from most of your life. So I totally get it. What is my my second last question to you is to say, yes, you've spoken to us about your body, your relation, like pivoting, getting into your body, but now I also wanted to ask you, what is your journey around money been like when it comes to working on in terms of just like your relationship with money, and also money and trauma in the body? I mean, that's why you started off in the money magic.
That's why I did this. Yeah. Well,
Did you ever, sorry to just interrupt, did you ever think there would be a relationship between money and the body? I'm always interested in how people think about that.
Oh, yeah. No, well, one of the other things I've been doing this year is the last 6 months is, I've been telling you about this, is this unpacking your emotional eating thing. And it has been fascinating to me how money and food are just like this. And in fact, I just was writing, I think yesterday, about deprivation, and realizing that for me, there's this weird connection between, and it's the same for money, food, and love, actually, about the depriving myself before somebody else can do it. And I deprive myself in all kinds of ways. I mean, dieting, I was put on my first diet when I was 6. Ballet says, if something hurts, just keep dancing. You have to be strong enough. So like, you're not allowed to have pain, right? You're also not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to be scared. So there's all these things you're not allowed to have. And so when I think about all of that, and I think about my relationship with money, I can see the parallels. It's like, I moved out of my parents' house when I was 16, and my parents were people who came from very working class families without much money at all. They were the first people to go to college. They changed class through college, through becoming university educated. My father was a university professor. I grew up in a world, and Dad was a gambler. He was a compulsive gambler. So, and my mother was a compulsive control freak, as one has to be with a compulsive gambler.
He was a gambler.
So, I mean, without like blaming anybody. I'm just saying that my family had, I've been discovering through you the lineages of fear, of deprivation, of fear of deprivation leading to addictive behavior. I mean, the women in my family, at least on my father's side, the women tend to be heavy. They have food problems. The men often drink, so there's this but it doesn't matter what the addiction is, right? It's still the same thing. You're still trying to distance yourself from the world. And my relationship with money has been, I was really scared. I left home at 16.
Yeah.
Now, it isn't like my parents didn't help me when things would get desperate, but on the day to day, I had very little, and I was scared all the time. I was scared because I didn't know how to drive, and I was walking home late at night on Seattle streets, which weren't very safe. I was scared because I was 16 and I was living in adult worlds, and I didn't know how to do that. I was scared because I hadn't had really solid ballet training, and I was taking company class and trying to do things that people who had some solid training were doing, and I felt, and I should do it, and so there were all these things I was scared of. And I'm just have been really realizing how that all has gotten reflected in my money story. And one of the things that has been really true about me has been I've managed to make pretty good salaries at different times, but always through putting on a costume. And I've also now 3 times in my life racked up massive debt, which I then, have to figure out how to pay off. And I feel like these things are all connected. And in terms of where I am in my story right now, I have a cushion because I'm really lucky. I inherited some money from my parents. So I have a cushion to figure things out. It's not going to keep me my whole life. So and at this point, I'm 63. I don't want anybody to hire me. I want to do this myself. So, what I've been working with you on is how can I allow myself to make substantial, secure money, be financially abundant, make good choices, stop the starvation, binging thing, which I've done my whole life, and like pay attention. Like, how can I be present with money the same way I'm trying to be present with my body? And how can that, support me? How can I support myself? How can I, like, no, man, I want to do it myself. This is my job. I want to do it. Of course, I'd love to marry a rich man, right? But, that's not the point.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I want to do now. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm really having to pull the curtains back on to even get to where I am right now, which feels really different than where I was 6 months ago.
Yeah. Wow. So, Lise, I think this is my last question. I'm sure everybody has been, well, not everybody, but some people probably thought about it. As you talk about the ballet world, the thing that often shocks me is just how I feel brutal it is in terms of body image for women. So, what has that, as you've been getting into your body, has that also helped you in terms of body image, as you've been also been working with emotional eating, you've been doing this deep work. And for someone who's struggling in terms of just how they see themselves, because maybe they are in an industry like that, like ballet. We all know ballet is famous for wanting people to fit into a particular body shape. What is the first step you would say to someone who's working through that body image? How do they get to the point where they are comfortable in their bodies and loving what they see in the mirror?
Well, first of all, I'd say that I'm not there yet. I'm also dealing with, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. Here's what I've discovered for myself. I have never or rarely been thin enough, in my opinion, or in the dance world's opinion. I was really good somehow. Anyway, the being really good also involved things like, just assuming I would always be able to do things that most people couldn't do, even just on a daily basis, like throw my leg up on a table or something, like that I don't have that because of the hip thing. I mean, I feel like I'm appalled when I see myself walking. I can't even go there. So, and I'm aging, I'm 63. So, so there's a whole bunch of stuff in there for me that I'm only now really able to look at the full level of pain that I've lived with my whole life. And I will say, it doesn't happen overnight. I couldn't have gotten here if I hadn't done pole dancing as a result of working with Mama Gina way back, well, not that far back, but like in 2014. And I started doing pole dancing in New York City with a bunch of other women who, like me. But for me, it was the first time that in a dance context, people wanted me to have tits and ass. So I loved that, and it was like, and I got to like discover ways of moving that I'd never let myself move that way. And then I started taking that into my teaching, right? And I taught some ballet classes for modern dancers where I was like, okay, we're going to start off with like pole dance warm-ups so that you're aware of your tits and your ass, and it really changed how they moved. And it was beautiful, So that's something. I did a writing workshop during COVID with some different groups of wonderful professional dancers in the Netherlands, people from the national and free scene and stuff, all ages. And we called it Boobs and Ballet. And I just had them, we did a little meditation. We wrote about words that they came up with about their breasts. And had discussions. It was amazing. And that's something I would like to continue, because the big thing is, like with anything else, you just have to bring it to your awareness. Right. And the main thing is that we're taught from so young as women to take for granted the way other people tell us we're supposed to feel about ourselves. So I think it's part of the whole journey that like so many women right now are on. And especially, I think, my feeling has been that people like you, people like me, people like Mama Gina, there are people at all levels of fame and fortune, in this, even someone like Marie Forleo, who's like known, or, there's so many people. But really, I think Oprah's a big example of this too. It's a kind of feminine revolution that's saying we have to be honest about who we are. And people, and everybody's doing it in a different way, right? But the bottom line is like, okay, you're telling me I'm supposed to be like this, but I'm telling you this is how I am. So, I guess I feel like if there's anything that's motivating me right now, because it's a hard thing for me to find sometimes, because after a lifetime of like, well, doing it better, right? That's my motivation, is like, I really think this is the only way forward, for each of us, men and women and everybody else, any gender you want to be. It's like, somehow we've got to step out of all the binaries that like colonialism, patriarchy, racism, all these things tell us, like, you're good if. It's like, no, absolutely not. You're good if you are a person who cares about the world, right? But other than that,
Wow. This is such an enlightening interview. I feel like you pulled the curtains back for us on this very glamorous world that most of us see when we go to dance recitals, we go to the theater, we watch the Nutcracker, we watch Romeo and Juliet and the ballet. We don't see the back end of what it's taking to be a dancer. I think most of us kind of saw it with Black Swan, but I mean, come on.
Yeah, but that's a little crazy. Sorry, I'm just getting my. I mean, that's a little over the top.
Right?
In a
But
way,
like,
you
definitely. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your work with us. Lise, there are people here listening and I know they would love to get in touch with you, to work with you. How do people work with you? Please, can you share with us how people can schedule a call or work with you?
Well, I have a website, lisebrenner.com, and there's, a lot of buttons on there that say schedule a free call. So you can do it that way. I'm on LinkedIn, Lise Brenner, writer, I think is what I am. And I'm on Instagram as Lise Brenner. So I'm kind of in a bunch of different places. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. And Money
Thank you,
Magician. Thanks, Lise. Oh my gosh, Money Magicians, thank you so much for joining, for having this time with us. Please, if you enjoyed this podcast episode and you loved what you heard, please forward it on to people, share the link with others. You never know who it's going to help. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or even Spotify. And also leave us comments on YouTube. Thank you so much. And until next time, cheers.